Welcome to My American Dream, a monthly program of Finlandia Foundation National. During this program series, we are interviewing Finnish entrepreneurs who have come to the U.S. chasing their American dream. Finlandia Foundation is a nonprofit philanthropic organization that was established in Pasadena, California in 1953 for the purpose of supporting and celebrating Finnish American heritage while maintaining ties to contemporary Finland. A major source of private funding for Finnish and Finnish American cultural activities, Finlandia Foundation awards grants and scholarships and sponsors a variety of programs, from concerts to book talks to webinars and online presentations like My American Dream. To finance the production of its programming, Finlandia Foundation relies on private donations. Please visit our website to find out how you can help.
Hi, welcome back to My American Dream. My name is Michel Wendell, and we will continue on our theme on talking to Finns about their American dreams. I have the pleasure of welcoming with me to our virtual studio today my old friend Eero Teerikorpi. So,
Hey,
welcome Eero.
Thank you.
So, let's see. We know each other from many years, and so I have. It's easy for me to ask you both easy and hard questions. So
sure.
let's start with the easy ones here. You have been in the States for what, 30 years or so, why don't you start off with telling us a little bit about your journey here, how you have, or actually where the journey began for you in Finland.
Yeah, it is. It goes quite far back. So back to the early 1970s already. Effectively, my father, he was a sea captain, so we got the interesting opportunity to travel the world with him. Early age, initially kind of Sweden and then Germany and Netherlands, and then 1974 I got to make my first trip across the Atlantic Ocean. It was Boston, Baltimore, New York, Philadelphia, and so I kind of got the first bug of what's living in the US. And then when on my prime age of 17, I was deckhand, Jungman, on a freighter ship that took off from Copenhagen and went all the way to Mexican Gulf and New Orleans and Houston and other interesting places. So that kind of this gave me a little bit of a taste what to come. And then when I was a college student, we got interested in all kind of computer science related matters. I had a first small company while student, and one of the companies was working with closely Apple computer, and we effectively was the first training company in Finland for the Apple resellers, and that connection led me to work for Apple Computer at the early heydays, 1984 on.
Okay.
And that brought me to San Francisco Bay Area quite frequently, and so kind of get the sense of what Silicon Valley could be. And so that paved the way, the whole idea, notion that at some point, and this was the early 1990s, when we decided, okay, time for an adventure, and we set our direction to Bay Area.
Okay, so before we move the focus here, first of all, I have to commend you on the fact that you still do look like a seaman, as you probably did 30, 40 years ago. But anyway,
today, yeah.
Yeah, before we go sort of come into the US side of it, a few words about your family, where you're from, and your studies,
sure.
and some of those things.
Yeah, I was born in Kotka, and since my father was a sea captain, that seemed to be an obvious place. But then when I was about 10 years old, he hauled whole family to North Karelia next to Koli, and that was when I was growing up, my kind of prime years early on. And my family, I have a number of brothers, four brothers, one sister, so we are a relatively big family. And that kind of created this interesting dynamics that I was a city slicker going in the little countryside village town and kind of a farming, and so that it was exciting and interesting. And but I've survived. I don't know if my surrounding was as happy as I was about us being there, but it was a really good area to grow up, and I still feel deeply in my roots that I'm a man from Karelia, so that it's just never something that leaves. But then obviously you have to venture out sooner or later, and so I set my target on technical studies, University of Technology, industrial economics, and then that paved the way for me to move to Helsinki, and this was at the late 1980s, and then got to meet my current wife, 30-some years, have two beautiful daughters of mine, so that, and I'm a proud new grandfather as well. My daughter chose to name my son based on myself, so it's a little Eero. That gives a lot of pleasure.
I must comment on your Corona beard once more, that you also look like a grandfather at this point. So anyway, you have obviously been involved in a number of startups and all in the IT sector. But so let's go back to how you ended up here in the States actually with one of them.
Yeah, it really is kind of a connection. It's kind of during my college years, I was pretty active, and we created the first computer training company in Finland. We were the leading company because we was the first and only one focusing spreadsheets. And then '84, when Apple Macintosh came out, I somehow saw the kind of something fascinating about that. So we approached Apple Computer and offered them training services. And that ultimately, when I graduated, led me take a product manager position at Apple, 85. And then 2 years in that, I started my effectively second company. Then the VP marketing at Apple and myself shoot off and created the kind of a system integrator company. And that was kind of early steps getting at the entrepreneurship going. We really kind of shoot off the nice start. Almost failed. Late 80s was difficult economic-wise in Finland, but nevertheless we survived through that. And then that let me start thinking and kind of opportunities and options outside Finland because of those kind of hardship years at the late 80s, early 90s. And an opportunity presented itself. There was a small software company owned by a Finnish company, was seeking someone to fix the company and to sell it. And that was my original assignment in 1993. I came here to fix the company, and through a chain of events, I ended up selling the company to myself. And so I became an entrepreneur in California. At this time, it wasn't something that I created from the scratch, but it was a nice kind of, and then 6 years after the kind of initial entry of the US, I ended up selling the company in real to a French entity called Esker. And when I already had been a couple of years, it got increasingly more difficult to go back to Finland, even if the first assignment was only for 1 year. But then 6 years later, there's no way back.
Yeah, I know how that works. Many of us do. And so given all of that experience that you had over those years with that startups and probably the previous ones, any sort of specific things that have become your sort of driving ideas, or something that you always think about, that when it comes to entrepreneurship, that these are the things that you should do or you shouldn't do, or something that you tend to sort of advise other entrepreneurs, Finnish young women and men who want to, trail or blaze their own trails in that area?
Yeah, it is a little bit of a double-edged sword. Myself, I wanted to be in charge. So that kind of led me not to take a position at a big corporation in the first place. So then that's kind of a starting point, that you have to really truly be driven, and you need to have a discipline, and you need to be willing to kind of take others on the ride and kind of naturally lead the other people around. So that is one decision that the one needs to take first. And then looking at opportunities, it kind of just, I always thought about that not only what's hot today, is where the market is actually heading towards and trying to find those opportunities and then believing yourself and building. It takes much longer, unfortunately, than anybody really would like to, but that then requires commitment. And then also looking all the kind of dangers ahead. I don't worry, I don't lose sleep overnight on my business, but I'm always looking ahead. I have a plan A, B, C, D, E, kind of based on how things may change. So that, it really requires this kind of a willingness to commit and willingness to work hard.
Yeah.
And finding that kind of a place.
Yeah. So those are like the main things that you're looking for in entrepreneurs yourself. If you sort of advise them or look at investing with them or something like that.
I give an example that I have a quite successful brothers and my daughter. So it's kind of an example that the different paths that one can take. One is like my daughter. She hasn't started company yet. She may end up doing that at some point. But she was one of the kind of early employees at Snapchat. I think employee 20. And she was able to ride along with the kind of a mega startup kind of a growth rate. So you don't always need to start something, just you can find a good company to join and be happy with that. Alternatively, like the good brother of mine back in Finland, he's been involved in a number of the high-tech startups as well, but he was always not leading the company, but he was contributing as a technical knowledge. And really successful by doing that. So that's kind of a comfort zone that if you want to be in charge of things and you have the comfort level of doing that, and then you can actually build a team around yourself that trust you and you trust them, then you are an entrepreneur. But if otherwise, you may want to choose to kind of look alternative path. And you can make your American dream by joining another company, not by building your own company.
Yeah, yeah. So did you ever like have a specific American dream other than that you wanted to come here? Did you have sort of a vision of that this is the only place where you actually can build and grow something? I mean, you already said how you came here and that you really didn't sort of found the company that you came here with, but you know, have you had any of those kinds of points that you have really been trying to drive towards?
Yeah, I really wanted to come to US early on. I wanted to be an exchange student when I was at the high school. Because the big family we had, we couldn't afford doing that, so I kind of missed an opportunity on there. That's why I was actively seeking and looking for the companies that has these technology ties in the US. So that clearly there was a kind of a path, and when I was young, I was avid reader of all kind of things, and obviously America had a great kind of inspiration. So that, and then when I was at high school, I remember writing a kind of a little short story about the Bay Area rapid transportation system that seemed to be so amazing at the time. It's like this is 35 years ago, and seemed to like, and also that then first time when I moved here, right next to the HP's pavilions, and kind of living in the kind of on my dream in that sense, that I could feel and sense. And kind of a side story, when we were giving birth to our first daughter, the book that I had with me was at Steve Jobs, The Journey is the Reward. So that was my wife's displeasure. I was reading that while she was in pain, so that obviously I had set my sight at the journey, direction, and kind of a image what I would like to be and become.
Yeah. So today, what do you feel like? Are you Finnish? Are you American? Are you neither? Do you have bits or pieces of both in you, or how do you see yourself, and how do you think that people perceive you?
They may see myself as American, but I never felt one. So that I resisted to getting citizenship all the way until late last year. The kind of things became too crazy in the US, and we had some difficulties with Tina's, my wife's, green card. So we decided, okay, finally we need to make the jump. And I resisted for a reason that somehow that if there would have been a passport for California, I would have taken that years ago. But somehow the kind of a whole idea of being American was not as exciting. America is a land of opportunity. California is a great example of that. But then there's definitely elements of me being an American Finn. But at the root, I always remain a Finn and specifically for Karelian, so that's something that you just can't take me, and that actually is where I tend to be the happiest. But obviously, since my family is here, this is really happy place as well.
So if you could choose, and other people's opinions wouldn't mean anything, would you go back to Finland, to Karelia?
Yeah, there's a high likelihood that I also do like sailing, so maybe I might be close to coastal area of Finland, but there is definitely kind of elements of that drives me and wants to be in Finland. But clearly after 30 years, maybe my view and vision and kind of what I think it is has kind of make it more cold than it is. So I definitely enjoy and like it as it is in California. The way we have set our life, that there's nothing to complain.
Yeah. So do you have certain features on traits in you that you sort of think that are really Finnish things, and what would those be?
I think I'm pretty direct. Kind of a Finnish thinking is pretty straightforward, and we don't beat around bush. We actually sometimes say out loud things that maybe should consider twice or even 3 times not to say. But is it the kind of but then there's also this underlying kind of a honesty. So that there's just kind of being honest myself and people around myself. So there's no way of myself deceiving and lying. So I feel that's one of the core virtues of the Finnish people. Tenacity, or the SISU, as we Finns like to call. I would have named our dog SISU if Tiina would have allowed. He ended up being Sibelius instead. But there's this element of myself being able to focus and kind of keep going. And while I'm looking ahead, I'm willing to commit myself and keep going. And that's something I think thrives. And also the kind of being able to go through the hardships, that there is elements of the kind of survival skills that being a native Finn comes along, so that it's not that easy to kind of for others maybe understand, but that we are willing actually to commit ourselves and to things.
Yeah. How does, I know that you have a twin brother. Does he view you as the same Eero that left 30 some years ago, or is he making statements that many of us hear from time to time, that gee, you have changed and you have become something that you are not, or you were not?
Yeah, I think when I look back at my brothers, we actually have a really nice family and good relationship, and we enjoy our time together. And so that then we still talk the same way. When you grew up first 25 years side by side, it's somebody that you can't let that go, and so that I can rely on him 100%, and he can rely on me, and so that and we are open and we discuss the same way, and I wouldn't expect that he sees me any different than I am, so that he has his own approach. He's taken. When I was in high tech, he was in a low tech. He was running, for example, Tulikivi and Upofloor and Karelia homes. So he was definitely more on construction side of the business, and I was on always something immaterial, like a software that.
Yeah. So I recall, of course, that both of your daughters, when they were younger, that they were really good and competitive swimmers. Yeah. And one interesting thought that I had about this chat of ours is actually around that. How do you sort of, because you have seen how competitive, or kids that are in sports in the US in high school, and how they, how dedicated they have to be and so forth. And have you, through your friends or your family, sort of had or been able to view similar kinds of scenarios in Finland? And do you have any sense of sort of comparison in terms of, are things so much more competitive here as people tend to think? Or what's your view on that?
It is highly competitive for sure, and but it's kind of when you are competitive in the US, it's not only the kid who is competitive. Actually, family needs to be part of that. So that almost 10 years, we had to wake up at 4:30 in the morning to take the daughter first practice at 5:15 in the morning, and then pick her up before the school started, and then take her again in the afternoon, another practice. So there was like 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, plus 3 hours during the weekend, plus any meets and competitions she had. So then, and both them have, so that it's a full-blown effort from the family. But then the individual, in this case my daughters, that they truly need to make the kind of a commitment. And it's hard because you can't have a social life. Your education suffers when you are aiming to that kind of a highest level of the competitiveness, and that we could see the strain. So I'm not sure if that as a program level, because all the high schools and school systems here support highly that level of athleticism. It's not quite the same in Finland. It tends to be more focused around hockey and maybe soccer and a few other sports like that. But here they definitely have more individual sports. And that, in my view, contributed to both of their success because they were willing to make and commit themselves to the kind of a long-term effort, because that was effectively with the Oona's case, at her best she was in top 16 in the US on backstroke, to be able to kind of maintain that high level. So it did a lot of work.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. Given that they have lived here in the States for such a long time, how and both you and your wife are 100% true, like Finns. Mm-hmm. How Finnish do they feel? How do they sort of ever discuss that? Do you have, what's your take on that?
They have they like Finland, so I have taken them quite frequently there. They both speak Finnish, so that it's nice kind of they could have easily lost the Finnish, but we made an effort, and sure. And even my grandson, my daughter has hope that we teach him Finnish language. So definitely there's this kind of a connection and tie that they want to maintain. My younger daughter, she's doing her PhD right now, and when she's done, she has seriously considered even moving back to Finland for a while, so that with her family. So that there's definitely elements of kind of a connection and willingness to kind of still kind of maintain and build those kind of foundation around Finland. But they definitely are proud of being kind of dual citizens and being able to demonstrate that as well. So there's nothing. Finland is one of those countries that seldom you meet people something negative to say. That Finland is highly regarded country in the US and around the world, and it's easy to go around and be a Finn. Yeah. I'd rather be a Finn than American when I go anywhere in the world.
That sometimes is the case. No question about that. So let's see. What I mean, I know that you have gotten involved in some other companies since with your business doing well and you having the time and so forth. What kind of sort of companies or entrepreneurs do you pick, or how do you pick sort of those types of companies that you get involved with? Is it just a question of hoping to make good money with being an early investor, or do you have an interest in actually being involved, or is it for the sake of whatever the company is doing? What's your view?
Yeah, actually, there was a phase right after I sold my company back in 1999. We established a company called Blue White Ventures, and that entity actually ended up helping some 30 different companies to US marketplace. That was the kind of a focus idea, that to find technology solutions teams that have a keen interest to enter a US marketplace. Us being a Finns, understanding the market dynamics here and opportunities and possibilities here, that was kind of something that I was actively pursuing and doing. And most of those were more like related to paid engagement instead of myself investing in a company. And I, since then, have been joining as an investor of smaller companies. But since I know how difficult and how long the path tends to be for the many of these companies, I see the angel investment somewhat questionable path, kind of as a success. But I'm willing and able always to engage with anybody who seeks my help. That over the years, initially this was the true blue-white venture. We are no longer doing actively that, but if there is a team of the people coming to US and trying to learn something, which I welcome everybody that they come to here and get the feeling and get the experience, I most definitely will be willing to open my doors and give whatever wisdom I can give them. So, and clearly that once again, when I started here, 93, there was almost nobody. So the support system was lacking. And I remember that after using mobile phone a number of years in Finland, I was driving 101 in my car without the phone. I haven't got one yet. But then I was thinking, okay, there's nobody who's going to call me. I don't have anybody to call. So I don't really need the phone at that point. And then it took years and years to build the network. Now that we have had these more people joining California and the Bay Area specifically, I think it's somewhat easier to find the connections, initially kind of among the Finns, and then kind of building up around that. So that I like to be part of that, so whatever I can.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you spend your days these days?
I'm still actively running my company. It's kind of an interesting chain of events that the company that I'm running. I sold it already once back in 2014. VMware ended up paying a nice big bucks for the company, and we were happy. But then 2 years in the deal, like any of the American company, they tend to pivot, and they decided that whatever piece we were offering their plans no longer were valid. So they decided effectively selling the company back to me. And I liked what I'm doing, so that we have a really solid technology and excellent team. Most of the guys who I've been working with, been with company 10, 15 years, and our customers are long-term customers. So it's kind of a nice, solid, steady business. It doesn't take my full 100% time of mine, which is great, because then I can dedicate the other activities as well.
Yeah, yeah. And what would some of those other activities be?
Obviously, being active on multiple levels, sports, whether it's skiing, cross-country slalom, tennis. I'm not a golfer. Yeah. I sail. So that the happiest place right now in the world is on a sailboat on San Francisco Bay. So that completely alone on my own on the boat. So that tends to be that. You get this kind of a breeze, it's the sun, and it's freedom that comes along with that. Yeah,
freedom is of course one of the things that most of us, to some extent, have been looking for in this country, and that has brought
that's
quite
actually
a few. Yeah, go ahead.
Part of the being entrepreneur, this is I'm joking to my team, that's a half joke, that there's a freedom to work 24/7. So but the first word is freedom. So I underline always that, so that this is kind of and this is how I like for myself. I don't want anybody to run my schedule. I want to be able to run my own schedule. I let my team to do that as well, so that they are most effective by doing that. So that if you can build this kind of a trust organization that typically may have to be smaller, but everybody knows their role, everybody can execute them on their own. We come together at times, and now with my company that I have people, the eastmost person is in Moscow, then I have a kind of Slovakia, France, UK, East Coast, West Coast, and then once a while, maybe every 6 months, every 9 months, we get together somewhere in the world, coordinate things, go away and come back together as needed. So that this is kind of interesting way. It's definitely a virtual entity, and this is something that people should be more willing to embrace. And I think COVID, by itself, as bad as it is now teaching the whole countries and businesses how to actually run remotely.
Yeah.
And then people start seeing that actually it can be quite effective. We've been doing this past 15 years, so there's really no change this current environment, what I've been doing, but I think that kind of gives if you look at it right, and it gives actually a lot of new ideas how to do things and how to run things.
Okay, thank you very much, Eero, for a very interesting discussion. Thank you also for all of you for your time today. We look forward to seeing you again. We'll have a new program coming out in 4 weeks' time. Please go and check out the finlandiafoundation.org website for a link to that YouTube as well as to other programming that we have coming up. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon. Bye.